If terrorism was a brand, its name would be Carlos. That's right, Carlos the Jackal. Small in persona, but large as life, he dominated the global arena of terrorism in the 60s. He was pin-up playboy, a man of mystery, trained by the dreaded Russian KGB. He wreaked havoc. He fought for the highest bidder. He killed for several causes. He was the world's most wanted and most famous terrorist of all time. Check out the playboy life of Carlos the Jackal. He lived life as a playboy. Carlos the Jackal was an image-conscious man and liked his suits. He was often seen wearing a black leather jacket and a Che Guevara-style beret. But don't let those looks fool you. This was a man indoctrinated since birth with hardcore communist ideology by his parents, who molded him into what he was to become, the world's most infamous terrorist. Carlos the Jackal was wanted for several crimes, including bombings and killings in France and Germany, even in the Middle East. He is currently serving 2 life sentences in France for the 1975 murder of a French informant and 2 French counterintelligence agents, and for bomb attacks in France. Carlos's life began as Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, born in Caracas, Venezuela on the 12th of October 1949. His father, a Venezuelan lawyer, was a communist who loved Lenin so much that he even named Carlos's brothers Vladimir and Lenin. Ilich's father was a wealthy man, his mother a passionate and devout Catholic. As a boy, Ilich was tutored at home by private tutors who indoctrinated him with communist doctrine, which was never lost on young Ilich. Things weren't going smoothly on the home front, though, and his parents divorced in 1958. His mother took Ilich and his brothers to live in Jamaica and Mexico for a year. In this time, Ilich learned several foreign languages. They soon returned to Venezuela in 1960. His baptism by fire. In 1964, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez got his first taste of political activism. He joined the Venezuelan Communist Youth, becoming involved in various subversive activities against the ruling government. In 1966, he traveled with his mother to England and was admitted into college in Kensington. It was during this time that Ilich got a taste of the good life and the playboy lifestyle that he would emulate for several years. His luxurious life of cocktail parties in England came to an abrupt end when his father decided to send him, along with his brothers, to be educated in Moscow, where he felt his sons would get a better education. Ilich was enrolled in Patrice Lumumba University, an institution that specializes in preparing communists for leadership roles in third world countries. The birth of Carlos the Jackal. In Moscow, Ilich proved to be a rebel and often went against authorities at the college and its harsh discipline. In Moscow, he returned to his lavish style of living thanks to a general allowance from his father. However, his rebellious activities cost him his college funding that was paid for by the Venezuelan Communist Party. In 1970, his participation in an Arab student demonstration was the last straw for the university, who promptly had him expelled. This led to Ilich traveling to Palestine to join the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP. It was his first tryst with terrorism. The PFLP was a terrorist outfit supported by the KGB, their mission to undermine the Israeli state using violence and terrorism. It was during this time that the mold of creating the Jackal was established. After extensive weapons and bomb training in a terrorist camp in Jordan, he adopted the name Carlos. Carlos the Jackal was born. The crimes. Carlos first tasted blood in 1970, and his first operation was none other than the bloody Black September attack of 1970. It was this time that several incidents of airline hijacking saw the political isolation of King Hussein of Jordan for being sympathetic to the PFLP cause. This resulted in his turnaround, and he ordered all Palestinians out of Jordan. In the bloody event of Black September, Carlos earned himself a notorious reputation. It was his baptism by fire, and his courage was noticed by all in the PFLP. He soon became the representative of the PFLP, returning to London after the conflict in 1971. In London, he was entrusted to covert operations and organized high-profile kidnappings of pro-Israeli businessmen and diplomats. Carlos even enrolled himself into London University and began living a highly social life of a playboy. The lavish parties and socializing was a cover-up, where he set up several safe houses for his operatives. Even though he came under the scanner of the police, they couldn't pin anything on him and no charges were filed. He later claimed the responsibility of several daring raids, including the notorious and cowardly attack on Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics of 1972 by the terrorist group Black September. Carlos the Jackal was always one step ahead of the law, and there was no proof to pin these crimes on him. He was unstoppable and smart, and the only thing that the authorities knew was that the attacks were the work of Carlos the Jackal. But who was he? His first solo terrorist attack. Carlos the Jackal's exploits of organization and support grew in fame. He was soon given a solo mission to attack Joseph Sieff, vice president of the British Zionist Federation, which raised money for Israeli charities. On the 30th of December 1973, Carlos skillfully broke into Sieff's home and shot him. The attack was a failure because the first shot only injured Sieff. When Carlos tried firing a second shot, his gun jammed. He managed to escape unharmed. His next mission, a month later, to bomb a London-based Israeli bank, was aborted. Thereafter, he successfully handled the bombing of car bombs attacks on pro-Israeli French newspapers, which caused massive damage but no human casualties. He also participated in the bombing of the French embassy in Holland by the Japanese Red Army. The attack was so deadly and took the government by surprise that the French acceded to the terrorist outfit demands. He even bombed a shopping center in which 2 people lost their lives and 34 people were injured. A top international terrorist. The bombings were recognized by the higher-ups who knew that Carlos was now their top terrorist. He was promoted to the Premier League of Terrorism, airplane hijacking. His next 2 missions failed miserably. His 2 bazooka attacks on El Al aircraft at Orly Airport in Paris on 2 separate days in January of 1975 were unsuccessful. There were no casualties. In the same year, he was almost captured in Paris after a close colleague, Michel Marcobal, was apprehended and taken into custody. He escaped a trap designed to ensnare and kill him. Carlos, on the other hand, gunned down Marcobal, including 2 policemen, initiating a massive countrywide hunt for his capture. Carlos escaped instead to Beirut, where he was welcomed by the PFLP and hailed as a hero. His first hostages. Carlos began his operations from Beirut. His first terrorist attack that he masterminded was an assault on the Viennese headquarters of OPEC, the Middle Eastern oil cartel. On the 21st of December 1975, Carlos took 5 gunmen and stormed the OPEC headquarters, taking 42 hostages, including several senior Arab executives of OPEC. The bloody attack included a shootout between Carlos and the police, ending in several fatalities, including police and civilians. The attack brought Carlos to the attention of the world media and made him famous. He was now an internationally wanted terrorist. Carlos conveyed his demands to the Austrian government, which included transporting all the hostages to the nearest airport and flying him and his team wherever they wanted. He also demanded that the authorities publicly broadcast a pro-Palestine communique that would be dictated by him. This was to be done every 2 hours or else he would eliminate the hostages. The Austrian government had no choice because of the nature of the hostages. They complied with his demands and carried out the broadcast. They even provided him with a plane which he used to fly to Algiers. In Algiers, Carlos freed 30 non-Arab hostages in exchange for fuel. From there he went on to Tripoli, but was met with hostility by the Libyans. He was forced to return to Algiers after refueling the plane in exchange for 5 more hostages. In Algiers, Carlos asked for political asylum and a ransom for the hostages, which the Saudi government provided. Expelled from the PFLP. According to the PFLP, the mission was a failure because instead of killing the OPEC ministers, Carlos released them. He was soon expelled from the party after it was found he had used some of the funds for his personal use. By now, the media was all about Carlos the Jackal. They pinned several attacks on him, including the June 1976 hijacking of an Air France jet in Entebbe, Uganda, which ultimately turned out false. In 1978, the leader of the PFLP died, and Carlos reorganized some of its best operatives and formed his own group that he named the Organization of Arab Armed Struggle. He established connections with Iraq's Saddam Hussein, the East German secret police, the Stasi, and Cuba's Fidel Castro. In January of 1979, Carlos married one of his agents, German divorcee Magdalena Kopp. From 1982 to 1985, Carlos indulged in several terrorist attacks, some of which ended in failure, including the bombing of a French train in 1982 that he thought was carrying former French President Jacques Chirac. The body count was mounting, and Carlos's reputation was a notorious one. In France and throughout Europe, Carlos was public enemy number 1. The downfall of Carlos the Jackal. Magdalena Kopp, however, was not so fortunate. In 1982, acting on a tip-off, authorities arrested her and sentenced her to prison. She was released in 1985 for good behavior and rejoined Carlos, who was living in Hungary. By now, things were going on a downward path for Carlos. Political pressure forced them to flee to Syria, where he retired and lived with Kopp in obscurity. Kopp even delivered a child, a girl whom they named Elba Rosa. The world didn't really bother Carlos much until Western intelligence got a tip that Carlos was hand-in-glove with Saddam Hussein and would be heading his terror campaign unleashed on Kuwait in 1990. International police organized an all-out manhunt for him, and Carlos was now a man on the run. He traveled from one Middle Eastern country to another seeking refuge. Even though Carlos was a wanted man, his playboy activity did not stop. When he settled in Sudan, the country disapproved of his drinking and womanizing habits. Even his wife Magdalena had left by now, and Carlos was hooked up with a young woman from Jordan, whom he married later. Pressured by the French, the Sudan government arrested Carlos and extradited him to France on the 14th of August 1994. Trial and sentence. In France, Carlos was tried for the 1975 murders of 2 policemen, Michael Mokarbal, and several acts of terrorism on the state. Carlos pleaded no guilt and called his arrest illegal. Halfway through his trial, he even fired his lawyer and began fighting his own case. He claimed that his acts were crimes of war and that he was a revolutionary. That didn't hold water with the court, and on the 23rd of December 1997, Carlos was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment in La Santé prison, where he remains today. In prison, Carlos remained active and kept on fighting his case, although all his appeals were turned down. In 2001, he married his lawyer, Isabelle Coutant-Payir, under Islamic rites, and soon after released a book praising Osama bin Laden for the 9/11 attacks. His constant efforts to plead that his incarceration infringed upon his human rights were turned down, and in 2011 he was once again sentenced to life imprisonment on grounds of the bomb attacks in the 80s. Carlos remains in prison, and it is unlikely that he will ever be released. What do you think? Was Carlos a revolutionary or a plain bloodthirsty criminal? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.